And so it is the skills gap that's driving the MSP business. It's also the number one challenge because there aren't enough great technical skills that can cover the broad spectrum and the complexity of these environments.
Coming into the MSP zone, an old friend, colleague who has been around the managed services community for quite some time, most notably with some of his work at a company called Continuum that was sold to ConnectWise. And now he's taking on a new challenge, a new role as the head of an RMM company selling to MSPs, of course. That company is called Synchro. And I am very pleased to welcome Michael George into the MSP zone. Michael, it's so good to talk to you and see you. Welcome.
Charles, thank you so much. Really kind of you to take this time out and reconnect and to be with you, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with your audience. And I'm delighted to be back in the channel. That's for sure. So thank you.
Yeah, you took a little bit of time off, but it wasn't like you were just idle. I do want to talk about that briefly. But for those who don't know you, you had a rather critical role to play in Continuum. Would you mind giving us a brief summary of that ancient history for those?
I'd be delighted to. If you look back at the origins of this industry, two fundamental companies that really started the current incarnation of managed services was what is now Kaseya, and the other is a company that started as Zenith Infotech. They were the first company to launch a remote monitoring and management tool, and also were the first to launch a backup and disaster recovery tool in the market. Summit Partners in 2011 acquired the assets from Zenith, and I formed Continuum. So I'm not the founder in the context of starting by rubbing two sticks together to start our first fire. We bought these assets. It had customers, it had technology, but it was a troubled asset at the time. And we created the company Continuum. I hired a world-class team of executives to drive and build an extraordinary organization. We did that in a way that had Summit owning the company for about 5.5 years. And Thoma Bravo acquired Continuum from Summit. And then 2 years later, after having acquired ConnectWise, Thoma Bravo put the two companies together. So that whole journey was an 8-year journey. The important work that we did, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of that, was we solved the most critical problem in the industry at Continuum, and that was the skills gap. There is both an opportunity and a challenge in the skills gap in this whole industry. For MSPs, is the number one thing driving their growth in their business. They're moving into more and better businesses. They're moving up market into larger organizations. And they're doing so because complexity of the work and the importance of the work in the security area in particular is creating a gap in the skills that can support them. So now you as a small business, small to medium-sized business, I say that, I mean a company easily up to 250 employees today are also using MSPs, if not as their primary provider, as one that's augmenting what they're doing. And so it is the skills gap that's driving the MSP business. It's also the number one challenge because there aren't enough great technical skills that can cover the broad spectrum and the complexity of these environments. I will again note security being at the pinnacle of that challenge. So we at Continuum had a integrated services delivery model where we had an offshore entity in India and one in the Philippines. And this was for our NOC, our SOC, and our help desk, and brought this integrated delivery model to the MSP to allow them to grow and scale exponentially faster than the cost of doing so would be, because they couldn't hire, and even if they couldn't afford the labor costs in local economies and local markets that we were serving. So that was really the important work that we did there. And I'm very, very proud of that. I will say one day after the 80th anniversary of the U.S.'s involvement in World War II and our landing in Normandy, I'm also very, very proud. We founded a thing called the Continuum Veterans Foundation because of the disproportionate number of veterans that are in the managed services, IT services, the managed services space. There is statistically, 9% of the U.S. population is either currently in service or they are veterans to the United States military. In the managed services market or the whole industry, 27% of our managed service providers have performed some military service, active reserves, whatever it might be. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of the work that we did in starting the business in 2011 as we did. It was at a time where both Iraq and Afghanistan wars were de-escalating, at least the U.S. roles, and we were returning these veterans back to one of the worst employment job recovery economies in our recent history. And so we actually helped them get training. It was a complete nonprofit. We provided our profits to supporting entities that would help retrain veterans into civilian jobs in IT in particular, right? Because they're laying cable and doing reconnaissance and other technical work while they were deployed, but they didn't necessarily know Windows, Microsoft, all the other technologies that we work with. So we had to retrain them. Anyway, so that was what we had done. Synchro, and I know this is a bit of a leading question, we're actually solving the very same problem, the skills gap, but we're doing the same through automation. And that's why, as you said, I took a hiatus from the channel, and I'm really excited to be back because we have a extraordinary opportunity to solve that same challenge, but do so with even greater lower costs, much greater simplicity, and do so through automation.
I have to say, Michael, I did not know that you guys were that involved in the veterans issues. I mean, we employ some veterans ourselves at MSP Alliance. I know there's a lot of MSPs out there who are veterans themselves, who own it or employ veterans. I had no idea it was that extensive, their involvement, but I'm glad you mentioned it because now I'm going to definitely, I think it's a good issue and an important one. Mm-hmm. I'd like to talk about, I know you did some things in between Continuum and Synchro today, but I'd like to ask you a question of, in that time span, could you maybe give us a few things? I know a lot has changed, but in your opinion, what has changed for you in your position as the head of Continuum and now as the head of Synchro? What has changed, and could you articulate some ideas there?
Sure, I'm happy to. I'm back in the category for a couple of reasons, and I'll weave that in a little bit to answering your question. I think the biggest changes are in these following dimensions. One is the funding of this industry. Summit Partners was our capital partner, and they were in, for instance, a value creation mode. There are certain growth equity companies that are there to help create value. But once a company gets large enough and they're owned by perhaps a different private equity company, they are in the value extraction mode. And so if you look at the three largest providers today, two of them are owned, one by Thoma Bravo, the other one by Insight Capital Partners. They're really trying to extract value. They're businesses that get highly leveraged through debt. They have to service that debt. Debt's been variable and rampant increases, as we know, in the last 2 years, a little more 2.25 years. And so, the cost of running these businesses has changed exponentially. And so they're kind of squeezing the value back out of those businesses. In the world of Enable is publicly traded, and being a small cap publicly traded company today is a very difficult thing to do. You can't innovate. You can't, the degrees of latitude of investment and so forth is very, very narrow. Again, if you're in a small cap, and in particular over the last, since basically April of 22, there's a tremendous downward pressure on these businesses, public businesses. So they're in the value extraction mode at the moment. And there's an extraordinary opportunity to be on the value creation side of that, to be an innovative company, to start to enable MSPs to grow fast, to grow more efficiently, to have better economics in their core business and use modern technologies to do that. Even Continuum at this point, when we took it over from Zenith Infotech, I mean, today that technology's bordering on being 20 years old. Kaseya, the same, enable, 15, 18 years. Even companies like Ninja is really 12, 14-year-old technology. So there's an opportunity for companies like Synchro that has a cloud native architecture to be a lot more nimble. We can grow through acquisition. This is all built from the ground up and built in a certain way that gives us a degree of flexibility and speed around features, functions, and version releases that allows us to really capitalize on those market dynamics. So that's one. I know it's a little long-winded, but I think it's an important dynamic. The whole private equity shift, it used to be a really good thing, and now in the market, unfortunately, just because it's if you look at the four companies I mentioned, they're all owned by large private equity companies that are now, servicing debt and trying to make a lot of money from their very large investments. That's number one. Number two is the technology that everybody is talking about is artificial intelligence, and that's so important. There have been a few shifts. I mean, AI has been around for a long, long time. I recently caught up on some old movie watching, and I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, that was a movie, believe it or not, from 1968, the year before man landed on the moon. I mean, what a vision that AI could possibly take over the world, which is now, right, a subject of interest and controversy. The most important thing is that you have new technologies commercially available that are enabling us to create a degree of automation that is extraordinary in the market. So we are using that. We're using the term AI, but that's an enabling technology. Really what it is in and around automation. And so that's really number two. And then third is that the tech stacks are out of control. If you look at the number of technologies it takes today to service these small to medium businesses. And so we're here to simplify that. We're actually going to be enabling people to license technologies from us that enable them to reduce their tech stack, not increase it. And that was a unique opportunity I saw that Synchro is going to empower the market with.
That's actually a really interesting point you made, Michael. Do you believe that the MSPs need fewer tools today compared to when you were with Continuum to manage and service an average SMB business? Or is it your position that Synchro is just going to be doing a sliver of that and let them go out and source, best of breed for other things?
A little bit of both. May or may not, we're not going to necessarily own a portfolio of the 20 different technologies that people use today. In fact, it's just, a typical, let's call it 35-person MSP that's pushing up around 10 million in revenue for themselves. They're using 43 different tools in their stack. And the reason that's true today is because if you look at the whole digital transformation, Charles, that started taking place in and around the internet 25 years ago, and that just got a massive acceleration because of COVID. It pushed everybody outside the firewall and caused everyone now to be working from home, or at least have the capacity to do so. And that really accelerated this movement toward cloud-based, cloud-native environments. And so it did so at a pace that the vendors themselves did not keep up with. And therefore, it created opportunity for a whole new genre of companies to emerge to try to fill in the gaps. There is no one leader. Even if you went to Kaseya or ConnectWise, who has grown by acquiring different things. They've done a nice job trying to cover the landscape, but they haven't integrated them to give you the sense that you're operating within a single environment. And so and that's hard work, by the way. That's just not easy. I mean, acquiring a company is easy. Getting the technologies integrated and working in a way that you feel like you never left the same environment, that's a very different thing. And so I'm not proposing that this is easy work they should have done. It's just hard work and they haven't done it quickly enough. So again, the acceleration of that digital transformation far outpaced any company's ability to deliver the adequate technologies around it to do so. We're going to own core technologies. PSA and RMM are our staple today and our strong suits. We partner in the backup space and we partner in the security space. These are two categories that we would consider owning as well, as long as we could create an integrated environment enough for our partners that it benefits them exponentially for us to own it. If it doesn't, we're happy to partner with them and use APIs or other ways to be communicating, with and through them. So that's a little bit about why tech stacks are out of control.
It almost seemed, yeah. Well, I respect your points. I understand it's not easy to do. The once you've acquired, it's not easy to just bolt in and make everything seamless. It seems maybe you're the beneficiary of some of that wisdom while you were out and watching all of this happen, and now having this kind of more principled, if I can use that term, approach to this. Yeah, completely makes sense. And I would wager that MSPs would be favorable to that type of, if we're going to engage with you, just make sure the stuff we're getting from you is solid and you do that right before you go on to expansion, as an afterthought.
If you look at the acquisitions that we made at Continuum, for instance, we only made 3 over 8 years. And if you look at how we were very, very thoughtful, very deliberate about it. We acquired our OneSoft and created Continuity 24/7, a backup product that was completely integrated in with our RMM. We then acquired Carver, which was the first of its kind security product. We did a bet the company strategy on security, Charles, and launched our security offering, partnered in with SentinelOne. Look at where SentinelOne is in the marketplace today. Nobody had ever even heard of it before we brought it into the market. That's 2015. People were saying security is not a small business problem. And of course, lo and behold, we said, we literally did a bet the company strategy on it. And today you can't really be in the business without offering security as a fundamental offering in the business today. So anyway, so Carver, and then we acquired BrightGauge, and we had only acquired it less than a year before we were acquired, but it's still done a pretty good job of integrating it into the Continuum platform. And I just share that with you because that is my philosophy, and that's going to be our approach to acquisitions and integrations here as well. If and when we make an acquisition, we are going to bring it into the market in a way as though it was built from the ground up by us, because there's no benefit to the MSP partner if we don't.
Understood, and I concur. I think a lot of MSPs will appreciate that sentiment. I have to talk about security and security incidents because MSPs are being impacted, as we all know, but also their partners are being impacted. My personal feeling talking to a lot of MSPs is that it's not a question of if you are attacked successfully. The question is, how well do you survive it? How quickly do you recuperate? How good are you at the getting hit and surviving? There have been some attacks across the board on different MSP tools. Do you have a comment to make about your approach about that general topic? I'm going to give you some wide berth there.
No, thank you. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself on this. One of the challenges, there are many challenges in the market around security. It's just a fundamental fact, and it's not going away. I think that even the predators, the security predators today are even a little bit ahead of the rest of the market in their use of AI to go and attack, the attack service within the small to medium business market. So I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. And we have to use, again, technologies to defend ourselves, at least in equal footing in and around that dynamic. But security it's an unsolvable problem. It is never going to go away, but you have to do everything you can preventatively, prophylactically in and around these systems and these environments, to protect yourself as much as possible. And in the event of a breach, to be able to sort of shut down, isolate, remediate, and work with a degree of honesty and integrity in and around it. It's the world we live in, and I think that's the only way to address these issues properly. The direction that we're going in is very simply using the best technologies that are available out there today, including backup, right? Because that is one way of dealing with ransomware and other issues. Not the only way, but it is a way, an effective way of dealing with that to minimize loss. Not always eliminate it, but at least minimize it. But the other is to start to leverage native technologies that are in the operating system itself. So today, if you look at things like Microsoft Defender, Charles, it's good, but is it good enough? Well, I don't think there'd be a market for SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or some of these other companies if it was good enough. And so we're putting our energy into empowering the native Microsoft tools, Defender in principle, to close the gap and make it not only good enough, but make it ultimately the best mechanism and defense. And it isn't a SOC. It isn't, right? This is just on the tool and technology side. But rather than investing in, an alarm that goes off when somebody breaks in and how quickly do you get the police department to show up and all of that other stuff, right? And to try to get the burglars out or at least minimize what they take, we are spending our time and energy locking the doors, closing the windows, protecting and a fortress, protecting the core environment to eliminate. And I say that with caution, but the goal ultimately would be to eliminate any porous, any environment that somebody could make their way into. Now, the one piece that you can't fix is, the human error. And so, and as we know, sending a link in email, making a phone call to get people to turn over information. So as I like to say, Charles, there is no patch for stupidity. So you still need to train, people and everything else. So, just because you are working in a human environment, we're doing everything we can to fortify the technical environment. And I think if you couple that with proper training, and there's a number of companies that do a great job in that category, running phishing exercises and everything else, I think that between the human training side of it and the technology training side of it, our approach in security is going to be right at the native operating system level and making sure that those environments are so bulletproof that you would eliminate the need to necessarily have to go and license something from one of the other vendors.
Sure. I know you've recently taken the helm of Syncro. You're a couple months into it now. You're a veteran. You know the space very well. You're entering this position. Many thousands of MSPs all over the world who already have established vendor relationships, and you also remarkably still have a ton of new startups, jumping in and saying, I'm going to be an MSP, whether they worked for an MSP before or they're coming into it from a legacy business model still, if you can believe it, in 2024. What's your challenge? Not your challenge. What's your goal and hope for Syncro in terms of what you want to do coming into this in 2024?
So if you look at Syncro's heritage, it was in and around creating environments and allowing people to step into the managed services business and have a commercial tool to enable them to set themselves up quickly, easily, and then to begin to grow their business in a very, very economical way. And I don't just mean the cost of the tools, more importantly, the ease of use, the ease of adapting them, and so forth. But what we've done over time, because we have been successful in that, is we have built a scalable platform for growth. Because a lot of our partners, I mean, most of all of our partners have been very, very successful using we have been scaling out. We're considered the starter kit, and we certainly welcome that opportunity to have people step into the industry by leveraging our platform to do so. But more importantly, today are really growing exponentially from companies that are coming out of the larger providers and stepping into our environment because of the complexity that exists today in these now aggregated environments, right? If you're with one of the legacy providers, there's been very little to no innovation. There's been little to no investment in the MSP itself and in the community. And as a result of that, they're spending so much time just working with the tools and working with the environments and working with their vendor that you don't make money doing that. It's an unnecessary evil when you're dealing in those environments. So we are now providing and have, partners that are scaling. If you look at sort of what we consider the bulge bracket of our ICP, our ideal customer profile, our ideal partner today, they have between 5 and 15 technicians. That's sort of the bulk of it. But having said that, we have plenty that have 40 and 50 technicians and user licenses and so forth. And the scale on it is exponential because we actually don't charge per endpoint, we charge per user. And we provided a pricing model that allows them to have an unlimited number of endpoints, because the ultimate goal is to have the highest number of endpoints under management by the fewest number of technicians. That way, an MSP can grow by signing up more customers and charging more for their services, but not having to add a technician every time they get a new account. So, right, this is we are enabling people to do a lot more using AI as, a specific area. And I'm happy to talk about, we have something that we're announcing, depending on when this piece that we're recording now gets published. It'll either be just before or just after a smart ticket management solution that enables MSPs and IT professionals to triage, categorize, and remediate tickets in a fraction of the time and with a fraction of the effort. And we're using really, native AI embedded, capabilities. We're not just bolting ChatGPT onto our platform. We actually are using core AI components to enable that. So that's our goal, is to have, we're going to serve that, what I consider to be massively underserved segment of the market, 5 to 15 technicians and more, but that category, and enable them to scale and spend more of their time on higher value work with their customer projects, things that are more complex, the things that create greater skills and greater value of the technicians themselves. We're not in the business of eliminating them. We're just giving them higher purpose and higher value work and eliminating sort of the noisy, administrative, burdensome tasks that can so easily be automated today. And we're thinking about an automation index to be the most automated environment for our partners and empower them, with these technologies so that, as I said, that they can scale, sign up more customers, have more endpoints, have more employees in their environment than anybody else on a per tech basis, and not, again, spend their time on the lower valued elements.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. I think we have time for one final question. So I want to phrase it this way. Your sentiment on the managed services profession as you're going into, and we see, issues with inflation. I don't want to get political, but there are some economic headwinds, depending on where you are in the world. The cybersecurity threats are very real, as you identified. Are you still bullish on the managed services market?
I wish my children had a appetite to be in this business or had a technical inclination. None of the three of them do, although I'm very proud of their choices around teaching and healthcare and other things that are in service to other human beings, which I think will be an enriching career for them all in their own way. But I think being an MSP today, I think the opportunities are absolutely extraordinary. I can't think of a better field to be in. We've talked about the digital transformation that's been long underway. And as we sit here today, Charles, you realize that the digital economy, I mean, the concept of the internet and all of that was born right, under our feet. And we today sit on an $11.2 trillion digital economy. That's how much digital commerce takes place in the world. That's in B2B and B2C in the transactional world. Forget about like communication and meetings, our opportunity to do this interview, for instance, and not be having to sit in the same studio is a simple example of how these technologies drive our economy. So I think it's an extraordinary category. I think we're in the second inning. I think this is far from over. I think that the opportunities for MSPs and folks that really want to build commercial businesses without the burden, again, of some of the administrative aspects of it and everything else, but to go do things that they love. I mean, what could be more exciting? What could be more, we have company meetings on a very frequent basis, and invariably, we're showing early releases of some of the AI stuff that we're doing and everything else. And people are like over the moon on this stuff. And somebody shouted out, they said, this is more exciting than being on the launch pad of a SpaceX launch. I mean, this is insanity. We are doing really transformational, really innovative things. So I think it's just an extraordinarily exciting field. I'm not sure that being in the IT services business is not for everybody, and we don't need to have 100% of our, but I think it's an extraordinary place to be if anybody has any inclination or desire to go do it. And in particular, in the MSP and the IT services space, remember, we're serving small to medium businesses, and small to medium businesses is the growth engine of our economy. So in as they say, in good times and in bad, and in sickness and in health, right? This is an industry that is not going away. If you can't go to a dentist, you can't go into a retail store, you can't do anything today where there isn't a high degree of dependency on their IT environment and infrastructure. No business can do it. You can't look at X-rays if you're going and seeing a doctor or a dentist. You can't make a purchase because everybody who uses cash today, right? Everything's cash. Anyway, we live in a digital economy, and the small to medium business, like you said, maybe there's some headwinds and all of that. Sure, in the large enterprise category, I'm sure there's been some slowdown and everything else. But, the whole world economy would have to shudder before this. And we've got a whole another set of challenges on our hands if that's the case. But I think this is a terrific industry to be in. It's a terrific place to build a great business, to employ people, to have fun, to build relationships with customers, and to do really important work and be an important part of our economy. Anyway, the short answer, I gave you the long-winded answer because it's complicated, but yet it's not. It's really rather simple. I think it's an extraordinary category, and we're in the second inning.
I love it. You couldn't ask for a better answer. I feel the same. I think not all the world, but most of the world, if not runs on an MSP, certainly helped a lot by MSPs out there. So congratulations again on this new chapter of your life, and wish you tons of success in what you're trying to do there. And definitely come back, and happy to have you back on in the future as you guys continue to innovate and do some amazing things over at Synchro.
Charles, it's been great to be with you again, reconnecting with you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you and to be with your audience.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.